Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of incredible sources and really try to distill the most profound insights for you.
Absolutely.
Today, we're plunging into a topic that, well, it touches nearly every single one of us at some point.
Yeah.
Marriage. The profound, often incredibly challenging, sometimes heart-wrenching nature of these relationships.
It really does. We start with such high hopes, don't we?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then the inevitable conflicts, those subtle disappointments, the unmet expectations, they all creep in, even in really loving unions.
Yeah, it happens. And the big question becomes, how do we navigate those? How do we find our way back?
Right. Back to true connection, genuine peace, lasting joy, when it feels like everything's pulling us apart, when our best efforts just seem to fall flat. What if the answer isn't what we think? What if it's not about working harder, but something, well, something radically different?
And that's what's so fascinating about the source material today.
Get ready for a deep dive that might just, turn your understanding of marital bliss completely upside down.
It really might, because it fundamentally challenges our instincts about problem solving. Not just in relationships, actually, but kind of in life itself.
Hope so.
Well, our default as humans, it's always to lean on logic, Rhea, on effort, on trying to do more or, fix things ourselves.
Sure, that makes sense. That's what we do.
But the wisdom we're about to uncover here offers a strikingly different path, a profoundly counterintuitive path to restoration. It really moves beyond the typical advice we usually hear.
Okay, so our mission today, then, is to distill the core insights from this powerful sermon. It's titled Marriage Restoration Through Rest and Relinquishment by Gourmet Preacher 073.
A fascinating title in itself.
It is, and let's be really clear right up front. This isn't your average relationship counseling session. We're not talking communication techniques or compromise strategies.
No Myers-Briggs compatibility tests here.
No, exactly. Or even like self-help tips from a conventional perspective. This is about a profound spiritual approach, transforming your marriage from its very foundation, from the inside out.
That inside out part is key.
Totally. We're going to peel back the layers to understand why our most well-intentioned human efforts so often fall short. Or sometimes, why they even make the problems worse.
Which is a tough pill to swallow sometimes.
It really is. And crucially, we'll discover how a radically different path, one rooted deeply in grace and these spiritual principles, promises not just restoration, but, well, an enduring peace and joy that can feel truly miraculous.
That sense of something beyond just human fixing.
Exactly. So let's jump right into the heart of the message. And I have to admit, when I first encountered this, it made me pause, honestly. It might sound startling, maybe even irresponsible at first glance.
It's definitely provocative.
It is. The central, almost shockingly simple answer to marital crisis presented by the preacher is a single Chinese phrase.
Fuck you.
Right. Which translates directly to abandon or give up.
Whoa.
Yeah. Now, I can practically hear you thinking, what? Give up? That sounds incredibly irresponsible. Are you seriously telling me to just walk away? To neglect my duties? To stop trying?
That's the immediate gut reaction, isn't it? It goes against everything we're taught.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
That's the typical human response. But hold that thought, because here's where it gets really interesting. This is where the profound wisdom starts to unfold.
Okay, I'm listening.
This abandonment, it's emphatically not about literal abandonment, not walking away from the relationship or your spouse or your responsibilities.
So it's not about checking out.
No, not at all. It's not neglecting your partner or condoning bad behavior or just detaching emotionally. Far from it. It's described as a deeply spiritual act, an act of relinquishment.
Relinquishment. Okay.
Yeah, an internal conscious letting go.
Yeah.
Letting go of your own striving, your own efforts, your own strategies.
The things we try to do to fix it.
Exactly. Your attempts to control or change your spouse or the situation itself. It's about releasing that tight grip, that grip we have on trying to fix everything or trying to manipulate outcomes.
That's it.
And instead, shifting your reliance entirely onto Jesus, trusting him with it.
Okay, that reframes abandoning completely. It's not abandoning the relationship, but abandoning your own self-sufficient efforts within the relationship.
Precisely. And the preacher himself, in the sermon, he actually confesses that this truth, this radical idea of abandoning your efforts for true restoration, is so profoundly challenging, so hard for people to truly believe and embrace
I can imagine.
that he initially struggled immensely to even teach it. He really felt people just wouldn't grasp it, wouldn't accept it. Because like you said, it goes against every natural human inclination.
Right. Our instinct is to do something.
Totally. He describes feeling constrained, almost unable to articulate it fully, until something happened. A truly unique and deeply personal validation occurred.
What was
Well, he recounts a time he was away at a conference. His wife, who didn't typically preach or teach, stepped in and shared a message at their home church.
Okay.
And apparently, unexpectedly, her sharing created this massive impact. People were deeply moved. And a significant number of them started observing their marriage, the preacher's marriage, much more closely.
So the spotlight turned on them.
Yes. And then came the moment that shifted everything for him.
Yeah.
His wife publicly testified about his behavior as a husband. She explained that she knew him intimately, knew his shortcomings, right?
Of course.
But she could say with absolute conviction that his transformation in their relationship over the previous 2 years was attributed solely to Jesus working through him. Not his own effort, not his willpower, not self-improvement.
Wow. That's powerful coming from a spouse.
Incredibly powerful. She emphasized it wasn't him doing it, but Christ in him. And when he heard this public, powerful, humbling testimony from the person who knew him best, that's when he knew.
Knew it was time to share this message.
Exactly. This living proof, this profound personal validation, it gave him the divine authorization, the confidence to finally articulate this radical, grace-filled approach, not as a theory, but as a living truth he'd experienced.
That context makes a huge difference. It's not just an idea. It's rooted in lived experience and confirmation.
Absolutely. And this really is a pivotal point, because when you hear give up or abandon in the context of marriage, our immediate human reaction, fueled by society, by our own anxieties, it's often fear or anger or even betrayal.
It sounds like failure, like quitting.
Right. It sounds like dereliction of duty, a license for irresponsibility. We're taught to fight for our marriages, to work on them, to never give up. But what we're exploring here is the profound wisdom, the spiritual principle that underpins this seemingly counterintuitive advice. This concept of owned only begins to make deep transformative sense when we truly understand the spiritual dynamics at play.
Okay.
Particularly the profound difference, the interaction between what the sermon calls law and grace.
Law versus grace, that's a huge theological concept.
It is. And it's central here. It's like shifting from one operating system to an entirely different one for your relationship.
Which brings us to that crucial spiritual foundation needed to even grasp these teachings, right?
Yes, absolutely. The sermon emphatically states that truly grasping these marital truths, and really in any deep spiritual truth that leads to genuine transformation, it requires the Holy Spirit.
Not just human intellect.
No. Not logical reasoning, not even extensive theological study alone. It quotes 1 Corinthians 2, verses 12-16. We have not received the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we may understand what God has freely given us.
Meaning there's a kind of knowing that transcends our natural understanding.
Exactly. A profound internal knowledge that goes beyond what our eyes see, what our rational minds can figure out, or what, secular wisdom can teach us.
Think about it. Tangible, visible blessings like a financial turnaround or physical healing or even an outward improvement in a relationship.
Right, things you can point to.
Yeah, even non-believers can observe those and appreciate them. They see the result. But the deeper thing, the spiritual understanding of grace, the very mechanism by which these changes happen.
That requires something more.
It requires a different kind of sight. Spiritual discernment, perceiving the unseen spiritual principles that, according to this view, govern true reality.
So this specific message, then, it isn't really for everyone, is it? The preacher is very clear about that.
Who is it for, then?
He says it's directed at what he calls spiritual people, those who are already rooted in grace and have a foundational understanding of what he terms grace law.
Okay, so people already operating within that grace framework.
Yes. He draws a sharp distinction between them and carnal people, which, he clarifies, isn't meant as a derogatory term.
Right, it's more descriptive of their operating mode.
Exactly. It describes those operating purely on human reason, effort, self-will. He says the latter, the carnal, will perceive this message, this abandon your effort message, as utterly foolish.
They'll just laugh at it.
Pretty much. They'll think it's illogical, impractical, maybe even irresponsible, because their framework is entirely different. For a carnal person, if the toothpaste cap is left off, they immediately go into fairness mode, right? Who's right? Who's wrong? You need to change this.
The default problem-solving approach.
Yes. Whereas a spiritual person, rooted in grace, supposedly approaches that exact same situation from a completely different paradigm.
And this distinction is absolutely vital. The sermon explains that gaining the mind of Christ, that spiritual perspective, it's not something you achieve through hard work.
Not through self-improvement plans or reading more books.
Right. It's presented as a gift, received through belief, a fundamental shift in your identity. It's about recognizing your reborn spirit in Christ, which is seen as perfect and complete, as distinct from your weak flesh, your old self, which is prone to sin and striving.
That old nature versus the new nature idea.
Exactly. The sermon powerfully draws from Galatians 2:20, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. This understanding, it suggests, liberates you from a performance-based approach to life and relationships.
Meaning you're no longer trying to earn love or acceptance.
Precisely. Not from God, and maybe not even from your spouse. In that same demanding way, it changes the dynamic.
Okay, but what about the worry that grace leads to license? That if there's no law, people will just sin more.
Yes, a common concern even among believers. But the preacher, echoing Romans 6:14, sin shall not be your master, because you are not under law, but under grace, asserts the absolute opposite.
Grace leads to freedom from sin's mastery.
Exactly. It doesn't license sin, it breaks its power. This human worry, he argues, is fundamentally a lack of faith in God's power to transform and restrain. It's not an accurate reflection of grace's true effect.
So it's about trusting the internal transformation grace brings, rather than relying on external rules.
Yes. It's a testament to the gospel's intrinsic power, changing hearts and desires from within, rather than just imposing external rules that we constantly fail to meet anyway.
Okay, this foundation is crucial. Law versus grace. Now, let's take this understanding and apply it directly to the heart of marital conflict.
Where things often go wrong.
Exactly. The sermon identifies a primary, pervasive reason why marriage, despite starting with love and promise, so often becomes, and he uses this dramatic phrase, love's graveyard.
Wow. That's stark.
It is. And the reason? Because people often, both partners, start approaching it with a law mindset.
Explain that law mindset in marriage.
Well, this law approach is insidious because it transforms what should be spontaneous love, joy, unconditional giving into a transactional relationship.
The tit-for-tat situation.
Precisely. The preacher calls it a work-for-wages mentality. Think about dating, the courtship phase. Before marriage, people gladly give time, attention, resources.
Without expecting an immediate payback.
Right. You spend hours talking, drive across town, do thoughtful things, not because you're hoping for something back, but just because you enjoy it. It's an overflow of affection.
Driven by desire, not duty.
Yes. But once married, this law mindset subtly creeps in. That free giving starts to vanish. Partners start thinking, okay, I fulfilled my responsibility, I worked hard, I cleaned the house, I dealt with the kids.
So you should fulfill yours. You owe me.
Exactly. You owe me attention or appreciation or intimacy or just a break. The preacher shared how he used to genuinely enjoy buying things for his wife or spending time with her, expecting nothing. But in marriage, under this law mindset, that pure joy often gets replaced by a kind of mental ledger.
Keeping score.
Yeah, keeping score. And this is precisely where the bitterness, the resentment, that profound sense of unfairness can really take root.
You hear it all the time.
You do. A wife might feel she sacrificed her career, her dreams for the family, and then gets deeply bitter if her husband doesn't reciprocate with what she sees as equal sacrifices or appreciation.
Or the husband feels he's breaking his back as the provider, dealing with stress, and wonders why his wife isn't more grateful or affectionate.
Right. This isn't spontaneous love anymore. It's demanding reciprocity for perceived duties. It's become a contract, a quid pro quo.
Not a covenant of grace.
Exactly. And the sermon is clear. This law mindset doesn't motivate happiness or deepen connection. Tragically, it actually stimulates human weakness, fleshly desires, leading straight to frustration, disappointment, and escalating conflict.
So the very act of imposing rules or expectations, even implicit ones,
Sets up a law, even with good intentions. It puts your partner under a burden that love was never meant to bear.
it's a profound observation. That shift from joyful giving to demanding reciprocity it saps the life out of the relationship, doesn't it?
Totally. It turns a partnership into a burdensome contract. Both sides constantly checking if the other is pulling their weight.
Which explains why so many well-intentioned efforts to fix a marriage by laying down rules or expectations often backfire so spectacularly. They're operating under the wrong system.
So with that in mind,
Yeah.
what does this mean for your marriage? It's a critical question, right?
Yeah.
Are you maybe unconsciously operating with this work for wages mindset? Are you keeping score, even subtly?
It's something to really reflect on.
And if you are, this concept gets even more profound when we dig into how the law, paradoxically, doesn't just hinder love.
Yeah.
It actually has a deceptive power. It stimulates sin.
Okay, this is where it gets really counterintuitive, stimulating sin.
Yeah, it's a radical reframe of how we understand behavior and conflict. The sermon dives into Romans 7, verses 7 to 11. Paul's explaining the function of the law there.
Right. The law is good. It shows us sin.
Exactly. The law itself isn't sin. It's holy, righteous good. Its purpose is to reveal sin. Like the verse says, I wouldn't know what coveting was if the law hadn't said, you shall not covet. It brings sin into sharp relief.
It defines it for us.
Yes. But here's the critical, often overlooked, and deeply counterintuitive part that the sermon emphasizes. Sin, taking opportunity by the commandment, produced in me all kinds of covetousness. For apart from the law, sin is dead.
Apart from the law, sin is dead. What does that mean practically?
This is where the teaching gets really mind-bending. Sin isn't just bad behaviors. It's presented as this dormant essence or quality within our flesh, our fallen nature.
Like a potential waiting?
Kind of. Imagine it like a powerful, destructive force, but it's inert. Or maybe like a slumbering beast. It only becomes actively alive, fully manifesting in sinful acts when it encounters a law or a commandment when it's forbidden.
So the forbidding actually activates it.
In this paradoxical way, yes, the law serves as sin's helper, giving it the very stimulus it needs to manifest its power. So when you lay down expectations, rules, accusations, condemnations for your spouse, when you law them,
You're inadvertently pushing the buttons that activate their weaknesses.
that's the argument. You're activating their sinful desires, their fleshly reactions, the very things you forbid, the flaws you point out, the behaviors you try to control. They often become more tempting, more powerful, more ingrained.
So the more you condemn someone for, say, being lazy,
The more bound they might become by laziness, feeling condemned rather than empowered. It goes against almost everything we're taught about moralizing or setting boundaries or trying to enforce good behavior externally.
wow, that is absolutely mind-boggling. Our instinct is point out the fault, set the rule, demand change. That's helping.
But this perspective argues the exact opposite, and the sermon connects this to 1 Timothy 4, which talks about those whose consciences are seared as with a hot iron.
Seared consciences. How does that relate?
The chilling idea is that constant exposure to condemnation, constant guilt tripping, whether from others or yourself, makes you accustomed to guilt. It desensitizes you.
Like a nerve that's been burned, it doesn't feel properly anymore?
Exactly. Your moral sensitivity gets dulled. And as a result, the passage says they end up following deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons that forbid things God created as good.
Like forbidding marriage or certain food.
Or even basic joys, yeah. All stemming from a law-based condemning spirit. It highlights how focusing relentlessly on sin, on rules, on what we shouldn't do, rather than on grace and God's goodness. It numbs you to the true freedom and joy of the gospel. Your internal compass gets fried.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it offers a radical explanation for why so many well-intentioned attempts to control or change others, parenting, friendships, even self-discipline, often backfire.
Trying to impose rules or judgment might inadvertently strengthen the very behavior you dislike.
It suggests true, lasting change doesn't come from external pressure, but from an internal transformation facilitated by grace. And condemnation actively blocks that grace.
Okay, so if applying law makes things worse, if trying to correct and control is counterproductive, what about just trying to solve the problems? Sit down, talk it through.
It's a rational approach.
Yeah, the rational approach. What does the sermon say about that?
Well, this really challenges another deeply ingrained impulse. Identify problem, assign blame, fix it through discussion or willpower.
The standard procedure.
Right. The sermon emphatically states, and I think many of us can painfully relate, that attempting to solve marital problems or disagreements often makes them exponentially worse.
Oh, I've seen that happen.
Haven't we all? The preacher uses common examples. A trivial thing, like the toothpaste cap, clothes on the floor, different opinions on parenting.
Little things that blow up.
Exactly. They escalate into major arguments. It's not just about the surface issue anymore. These small irritations become triggers. They bring up past grievances, deeper resentment.
And suddenly you're fighting about everything but the toothpaste cap.
Right, leading to outright conflict, bitter accusations, maybe even thoughts of divorce. He mentions hearing hundreds of complaints in counseling, all echoing the same pattern. People fixate on one specific problem.
If only it just changed this one thing.
Exactly. Believing if that were fixed, everything would be fine. But he calls this a fantasy because if it's not that one thing, it'll just be another as long as this underlying law dynamic is active.
It's like relationship whack-a-mole.
Perfect analogy. The moles just keep popping up. And during these conflicts, finances, chores, whatever, both partners are often lawing each other.
Pointing fingers, bringing up the past.
Yes. Actively highlighting flaws, unmet expectations, past failures, painful memories. This mutual condemnation creates a vicious cycle. Defensiveness, anger, withdrawal. It completely prevents grace from operating.
Because grace can't operate where law and condemnation rule.
Precisely. It's a self-defeating strategy, even if airing grievances feels instinctively right or necessary. The preacher uses that vivid analogy of Job's friends.
Ah, yes, the comforters.
Right. They came to comfort Job in his immense suffering, but instead they constantly accused him of hidden sin, implying his suffering was punishment.
Terrible comfort.
Awful. This relentless condemnation, maybe well-intentioned in their misguided theology, drove Job to despair, even complain against God. They were effectively doing Satan's work by intensifying Job's suffering through guilt. Their attempts to help actually broke him down further.
And this leads to that really controversial point this sermon makes.
The one about marrying an unbeliever.
Yeah. He says it's sometimes better, spiritually speaking, to marry an unbeliever than a Christian who lives by a law mindset.
Wow. Why?
Because the legalistic Christian, he argues, will constantly use scripture or what they think are biblical principles to condemn, accuse, and judge their spouse. This creates far more bitterness, spiritual oppression, and destructive dynamics than an unbeliever might, who operates without that layer of spiritualized condemnation.
That's a really bold statement, but it hammers home the point about how damaging legalism is in relationships.
It really does. And he emphasizes the unhelpful nature of condemnation itself. Just pointing out faults, no matter how accurate, doesn't help someone change.
It just binds them further to sin.
Yes, makes them feel seen for their brokenness, not their potential in Christ. The preacher shares his own practice. He says he never condemns others because he understands this truth. He says you condemn him, he only gets more bound by that sin. But you give him grace, he gets set free.
So this whole section really dismantles our usual problem-solving toolkit, doesn't it? Identify, blame, discuss, fix. It says that's actually counterproductive spiritually.
It does. You've probably experienced it yourself. A small disagreement blowing up into something huge, draining all your emotional energy. This deep dive explains why. Both sides are unknowingly stimulating sin by operating under law, demanding rights, trying to impose will.
Instead of resting in grace, it's a cycle only God's intervention can really break.
So if trying to solve problems ourselves only deepens the quagmire, if our efforts to control and condemn make things worse, what is the alternative? What's the path out?
The constructive part, what do we do? Or perhaps, what do we not do?
Exactly. If problem solving as we know it is futile, then what is the way forward? The true solution, according to the sermon, is that abandonment again. But in that profound sense, total, unwavering reliance on Jesus, allowing him to fight the battle for your marriage.
Stepping back so he can step in.
Yes. Stepping back from the conflict, inviting divine intervention. The preacher uses that powerful imagery from Exodus 14, the Israelites at the Red Sea, trapped, army closing in, impossible situation.
Yeah, nowhere to run.
And Moses says, by divine instruction, do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again.
Stand firm, what does that mean here?
The preacher interprets stand firm using the Chinese idiom onzi, which means rest. Spiritual rest, non-action.
So stop fighting.
Yes. He emphasizes that your problems, those pursuing Egyptians, your marital conflicts, your spouse's behaviors, your frustrations, they will vanish when you cease trying to fight them yourself. When you stop striving and instead just trust God, resting in his finished work. The battle is the Lord's.
This concept of spiritual rest, it's echoed in Hebrews 4, right? It's a Sabbath rest for God's people.
Exactly. Hebrews 4.9-11 speaks of a true Sabbath rest remaining. And this spiritual rest means precisely what the Red Sea example shows, resting from their own works, just as God rested from his.
Resting from our own frantic efforts.
Yes. And here's another counterintuitive insight. The preacher connects this to the Greek word for evil, poneros.
How does poneros fit in?
He explains that poneros carries this connotation of being troubled, agitated, burdened by labor, by struggling in your own strength. So actively trying to fix things yourself, constantly striving, struggling, working to manipulate outcomes or change your spouse, that's actually evil in this specific spiritual sense.
Not morally bad, but resisting God's way of grace and rest.
Exactly. It's operating outside of his intended method. He also contrasts the iron rod from Psalm 2, often signifying God's judgment, with Aaron's wooden shepherd's staff.
Law versus grace again.
Kind of. While God's iron rod reveals sin, a spouse who constantly condemns wielding that iron rod of judgment against their partner just makes the marriage unhappy.
Yeah.
It doesn't bring freedom. But Aaron's wooden staff, which miraculously budded, signifies life, grace, loving guidance.
So this isn't just passive surrender, it's an active, faith-filled trust that actually releases divine power.
That seems to be the idea, allowing God to work where our efforts have failed.
Okay, but for many of us, resting or non-action sounds, well, passive, maybe even lazy. How do you do rest?
Great question. And the preacher introduces this truly unforgettable and actually quite funny analogy to bring it to life. The bump and fall king.
The what now? Bump and fall king?
Yeah. Penshi Wang. It refers to a street scam in China, Penshi, where someone intentionally throws themselves in front of a slow car or a person, fakes an injury, and tries to extort money.
Okay. How does that apply to marriage?
He brilliantly repurposes it for a spiritual lesson. He advises believers to act like this bump and fall king in their marriage. At the slightest sign of conflict, disagreement, any problem, toothpaste cap, finances, whatever.
What do you do? Fake an injury?
No, you immediately fall down. Mentally and spiritually disengage from fighting, from fixing, from explaining or defending. Just immediately rely on Jesus.
So instead of bracing for impact or fighting back, you just collapse, spiritually speaking.
Exactly. Don't stand firm against the hit. Don't engage the argument. Just spiritually collapse and let Jesus handle it. He explains that if both partners do this, when an issue arises, this immediate surrender and reliance on Jesus,
Then the conflict has nowhere to go.
right, it can't escalate. They both fall down spiritually.
Yeah.
The human striving stops and the fight just dies. This requires what he calls softness in the flesh.
Humility, willingness to lose the argument.
Yes, a willingness to be seen as weak, maybe, allowing God's grace to cover your weakness and his power to take over.
Does he share any examples of this working?
He shares a really compelling personal testimony. He claims he and his wife now have virtually no conflicts, and he attributes it entirely to consistently using this bump and fall king strategy.
No conflict, seriously.
That's what he claims. He recounts the only major fight they ever had, an intense all-nighter happened before they were married, over wedding arrangements.
Oh, classic pre-wedding stress.
Totally. Exhausting, bitter, seemed insurmountable. But even then, after that draining fight, a decision point came. The very next morning, the engagement he'd ordered arrived.
Talk about timing.
Right. And he decided, in this act of profound trust, to propose anyway, despite the unresolved fight. He just trusted Jesus to handle it.
Wow, that takes faith.
He described how, in that moment of proposal, both he and his now wife were just overcome by the Holy Spirit. They had this profound realization. Their spiritual union in Christ was way more important, more fundamental than any of their differences.
Or the differences.
He says they immediately dissolved in the presence of God's Spirit. That early, powerful experience taught him the lifelong lesson. Consistently fall down on Jesus whenever conflict threatens. Surrender his own efforts. Rely on the supernatural.
That's a powerful story. It really illustrates spiritual surrender over human striving.
It's incredible, isn't it? How that one experience shaped his whole approach. It definitely makes you rethink what success in marriage looks like. Maybe it's not the absence of issues, but the absence of strife around the issues.
The absence of that destructive conflict energy.
Exactly. Which brings us to the paradox of grace. This idea that giving up in that spiritual sense actually leads to breakthrough, not defeat.
Which goes against every instinct to push harder, communicate more, try harder.
Right. And the sermon offers a crucial caution here. Even good testimonies of beautiful restored marriages like the preacher's own, which sounds amazing, can ironically become a new law for listeners.
How so? A good testimony becomes law.
Yeah. When someone hears about a seemingly perfect, conflict-free marriage, their immediate fleshly reaction might be comparison. And then condemnation.
Why isn't my spouse like that? Why isn't my marriage that easy? What am I doing wrong?
Exactly. That mental comparison leads to more conflict, disappointment, inadequacy in their own relationship. The key, he stresses, is to see Jesus' work behind the testimony, not the person's effort or their perfection or their skills.
See Jesus, not the person. Otherwise, you fall into judgment.
Yes. If you see Jesus, you find grace and hope for your own situation, which ties into that profound truth about weakness and grace.
Okay, explain that connection.
When you encounter a standard, a perfect marriage testimony, a biblical command that you just cannot meet in your own strength, you naturally feel weak, inadequate, maybe defeated.
That feeling of falling short.
But this very weakness, the sermon powerfully argues, is precisely where grace abounds all the more. Remember Romans 5.20. It's in recognizing your utter inability, your shortcomings, your fleshly weaknesses.
That you're driven to Jesus.
Exactly. Because he's already paid the price for all inadequacy, all sin, all failure. It's about understanding that God's power is made perfect, shown most clearly in our weakness. When we surrender our striving, his power flows.
So our weakness isn't the problem, it's the prerequisite for experiencing his grace power.
That seems to be the core message. And this leads to what the preacher playfully, but provocatively, calls his irresponsible advice for those in really shaky crisis marriages, those hanging on by a thread.
What's the irresponsible advice?
He tells them, bluntly, abandon, give up, meaning release your desperate, white-knuckled grip on the marriage. Trust God with the outcome, even if it seems hopeless, even if your spouse is threatening to leave.
Just let go.
Yes. Paradoxically, this mental and spiritual release, this letting go of control and surrendering the outcome to God, can sometimes cause the spouse who was intent on leaving to reconsider.
Why would that happen?
They might suddenly see a new strength, a new independence, an unshakable peace in their partner, a reliance on Christ that changes the whole dynamic. It shifts your focus from controlling the outcome to trusting God's sovereignty and love, even when you can't see the path. It frees you, regardless of what the other person does.
It's about finding your security in God, not in the marriage itself.
Just precisely. And he gives a really practical, everyday example of this abandonment and rest. Back to the toothpaste cap.
Ah, the infamous toothpaste cap.
Right. Instead of arguing, or even just silently fuming, you simply put the cap back, without accusation, without a sigh, without expecting a thank you or anything in return.
Just a simple act of service, done freely.
Yes. Repeated, small acts of unconditional love and service, done without an agenda, without a mental ledger, without waiting for the other person to change first. When you do this, without condemnation, without a law mindset,
What happens?
it allows what he calls a warm current of love to flow. This gentle, consistent, grace-filled action starts to melt those accumulated resentments. And crucially, it creates the space for God to work on the other person's heart, independently of your efforts.
So genuine change comes from God's work within them, not from our manipulation or nagging or efforts.
That's the profound underscore here. This abandonment is a deep spiritual posture, humility, trust. It actively creates space for divine intervention, for God to move. It's about shifting focus from the problem and your partner's flaws.
To Jesus' finished work, his love for you, his power to transform from the inside out.
So what does this all mean for you, for your marriage, in practice? It means embracing a very different kind of strength.
A strength found in surrender, not striving.
Exactly. Strength from rest, not effort. Strength from letting go, not fixing. Entrusting your beloved, your union, to a power far greater than your own.
It really turns our usual approach on its head.
Completely.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into marriage restoration through rest and relinquishment, the core message we're left with is, well, it's profound, potentially revolutionary for your relationships.
It challenges so much of what we assume.
It does. The path to restoration, to genuine peace and joy, isn't through relentless human effort or endless arguments or trying to manipulate or fix your spouse.
It's found in that radical, counterintuitive act of abandoning your own striving, your strategies, your attempts to control.
Yeah. Consciously stepping back, trusting Jesus' finished work, and allowing his grace to transform the relationship from the inside out, resting in his sovereign power.
And this isn't just an intellectual concept, right? Not just rules to follow. It's a spiritual truth that demands faith, real trust.
Absolutely. Mental assent isn't enough. The power for true transformation, for lasting peace, lies in God's faithfulness and ability, not in our capability or willpower or even the best counseling techniques.
Which leaves us with a really important question to ponder, doesn't it? Long after this deep dive is over.
Yes, definitely something to really mull over. Ponder this. If constantly striving to fix your marriage, or really any relationship, only stimulates more problems, fuels resentment, and paradoxically binds both you and your partner to the law of human expectation and performance.
Then what hidden desires might you be unknowingly feeding in yourself or in your partner by trying so hard? What's driving that striving?
Great question. And then what would it truly look like in your specific situation right now to stop striving, to genuinely surrender your deepest marital anxieties, your biggest complaints, your desire for control?
To a power beyond your own, trusting in that spiritual rest that promises not just a temporary fix, but a miraculous lasting transformation.
What would that look like for you? That's the thought we want to leave you with today.